Hello and welcome to day 4 of the RTPI Planning Enforcement Week. This is the 9th session of the week. We've got a few more sessions later today and tomorrow, so you're all very welcome. I am Roisin Willmott. I'm the RTPI's Director for Wales and Northern Ireland. Today we're discussing a very useful tool and one that is possibly underused by enforcement officers. And we felt that direct action, which is our topic for today, was of particular interest and warranted its own session during this week. Direct action allows local planning authorities to take necessary steps to remedy a breach of planning control where there has been a failure to comply. I'm very pleased to welcome Jane Jones from Snowdonia National Park Authority to share with us her experiences of using this tool, and what better way to learn about tools and procedures than through a case study. Jane's planning career started in 1999 at South Lakeland District Council as the Planning Enforcement Officer, following training to become a chartered surveyor. Jane also worked at Lake District National Park Authority before moving to Wales. And in Wales, she's worked at Powys County Council and Flintshire County Council before taking a role up at Snowdonia National Park Authority in 2007. And Jane is currently the acting planning manager at the park. Jane has served on the management committee for NAPE and the RTPI's General Assembly, and she is presently the RTPI Cymru Vice Chair. So Jane is going to whisk us off to the glorious setting of Harlech in North Wales and take us through the experience of using direct action and the challenges Snowdonia National Park Authority faced to carry out the demolition of the derelict St David's Hotel, which for many years stood as a blight on the landscape in close proximity to the Harlech Castle World Heritage Site. So I'm going to hand over to Jane, but please do post questions during the presentation and we will seek to answer as many of these as we can following Jane's presentation. So Jane, croeso, welcome, and over to you.
Brilliant. Thanks, Roisin. I don't know, can everybody see my presentation? Hopefully, yeah. Okay. Well, thank you very much for that introduction. I'd just like to start in saying that this sort of case hasn't actually sort of been finalised yet, so I'm not going to go into specifics in terms of sort of funding and costing side of things. I'm also not going to talk specifically about sort of who the developer is and so forth. But really, my main sort of point in wanting to sort of discuss this case study with you today is purely so you can be aware of the kind of things that you need to consider in terms of direct action and sort of the issues and the concerns and problems that we faced, certainly in securing the demolition of St David's Hotel. I've got to say that when we first sort of started being involved with this case, I actually never thought we would actually go through to demolition. So yeah, it's been quite a time. So just to sort of give some kind of context, so anybody that doesn't know the Harlech area or even sort of where Snowdonia is, obviously sort of based in North Wales area, and you will see that Harlech is situated on the west coast of Snowdonia National Park. And just to provide you, this is the actual size of the building itself, quite a large building. You'll see that that there's the railway. There's a railway line to the left-hand side. It's quite a steep site. It's got a garage and there's obviously a main road going by as well. So it's in terms of sort of demolishing it. There was those issues to sort of take into account. And this is basically just to put Harlech in context itself. You'll notice that there's Harlech Castle to the left, which is in the World Heritage Site. It's a World Heritage Site. Then you'll see that there's this Coleg Harlech with the student accommodation block. And then to the right of that, the big building is St David's Hotel itself. Now Harlech is previously is sort of been going into some kind of sort of decline really the last sort of few years in terms of the actual college buildings, and the college there has actually sort of closed down Those buildings have been recently sold off and they're currently all empty. The student accommodation block and the St David's area, as all is one site. So it's a case the student accommodation block is no longer part of the actual college area. You'll notice that there's the golf course as well, which I'm told, I don't play golf at all, but it's renowned to be a very good golf course. But Harlech itself seemed to be going in decline in the fact of losing the college and everything. So there has been a regeneration programme that Cadw, Welsh Government and Gwynedd County Council are involved with, and obviously Snowdonia National Park. And this is the hotel itself. Quite a big imposing building. It's not listed at all. And you'll notice sort of the trees as the garage is just behind. And then I've got another photograph just to put more context. This is basically taken from the main roadside, and you'll see there that the windows are starting to fall out. There's some delightful vegetation growing from the chimneys, and in the back there you can see the Theme Peninsula. There's Port Merion in the background there. So just hopefully that's provided you with a bit of context in respect to the building itself. So in terms of the planning side of things, the site with the student accommodation block and the hotel, an application came in 2009 for the demolition of the hotel and the College Hall of Residence and construction of a new 130 bedroom hotel with 76 holiday apartments with formation, new tunnel road layout, landscaping and associated engineering works. A big scheme, and one which we thought that, you know, potentially to turn around the fortunes of Harlech, something that they needed in terms of promoting the golf course, obviously Harlech Castle, and just bringing the visitors in where they'd stay for several days rather than just visiting for the day. So planning permission was approved for that in July 2009. Developers were keen to see that start, but there's issues with funding. So we were kept being told about, and nothing sort of was coming to fruition, and the permission was coming to the end of the 5 years, whereby maybe naively or whatever, we then looked at discussing with the developer in trying to sort of secure the permission. So we granted a further permission to basically sort of keep that permission alive for longer, which was then granted sort of in June 2004. And this basically sort of got removed sort of the prior development commencing conditions, apart from the bat mitigation side. And all being well, so we thought things seemed to be starting okay in terms of that the developers did start on the erection of the bat barn, and we thought this is it, that they've obviously got the funding in place, that this big project is going to materialise. However, the works came to a halt, and obviously the condition of the hotel just it deteriorated even further. This is the actual bat barn itself. They got to that stage, and then the builders just walked away. The understanding is that it's because they've never got paid at all. So we're in a situation that we've got an unfinished bat barn, we've got a hotel that's deteriorating rapidly, and we were ending up with a wealth of complaints from locals, but also visitors from further afield as well. So it was a case of what next, and the hotel itself, you'll see, started to sort of deteriorate to the extent that the children sort of being vandalised, and we ended up having to, with Gwynedd Council, took responsibility in terms of public protection came, and they shuttered all the bottom area windows off. It still didn't stop people from entering the building at all. That's the upper levels there that you can see, and obviously all the windows are now sort of fallen in or broken, and it was starting to really look a very sorry state. and just to sort of give you more context in respect to that. So suddenly we never got to sort of hear anything further from the developers at all. It's sort of, they'd almost gone to ground, so to speak. So the fact that no contact and pressure was mounting for something to be done with the building, we considered it was expedient to take action in September 2015. And then we then went to serve a section 215 notice on the 2nd of December 2015, which was due to take effect at the beginning of January. In terms of the actual notice itself, it was the requirements of it. We had to sort of think about whether it's a case that we wanted it just to be repaired, the building, or is it a case that it had got too far whereby we needed to consider demolition of it. Bearing in mind that the permission back in 2009 was for demolition, the state that the hotel was getting in now at this time, it was determined that we would consider to initiate and ask for demolition, rightly or wrongly. I don't know, because really at that point we knew that we didn't have the funding, but maybe there was hope that the developers would actually go ahead and secure compliance with the notice. The notice itself was given, they were given a timeline of 15 months, and the 15 months was required because of the bats that were living in the hotel building and using it as a roost. So basically no appeals forthcoming, so the actual notice took effect. Sorry, just done that. And I was just to provide another photograph in terms of, no, I've gone past that, sorry. Okay, so in terms of that, the notice took effect and the compliance date was due to be complied with on the 18th of April 2017. As you can see, the date in the photograph is the 20th of July. It was quite clear that it hadn't been complied with. So the next issue, the point was to take prosecution proceedings, and these took place in July, August. Sorry, that's another photograph showing that it was not complied with. So yeah, so in terms of prosecution proceedings, we took those in July, August 2017, and the hearings took place, and the defendant failed to turn up, and it was heard in their absence. We obviously, with a building of that size, we did achieve the maximum fine of £1,000, victim surcharge 100, and costs of £552.20. Not quite sure where the 20 came from, but it was given. In terms of the size of the building, and the maximum fine £1,000 obviously didn't feel as a sort of a big punishment to some extent. So yeah, it was a good result, but obviously I think fines they should consider re-looking at the fines for notices such as these. Anyway, there was still no compliance or contact from the owner at all. We just literally, there was nothing. So in that instance, we went for the second prosecution proceedings, and it literally is a year after the notice should have been complied with. And in this second proceedings, we achieved a fine of £20,000, 900, victim surcharge 170, and costs of 782. Obviously, the second prosecution and the fine was obviously a much more pleasing fine to receive. And I just wanted to point out that this was because we raised the section 2166 with the magistrates in terms of that you can ask for sort of further fines. I'll just read it. If after a person has been convicted under previous provisions of this section, he does not, as soon as practically do everything in his power to secure compliance with the notice, he should be guilty of a further offence and liable on summary conviction to a fine not exceeding 1/10 of level 3 on the standard scale for each day following his first conviction on which any of the requirements of the notice remain unfulfilled. And this is the criteria which was used, hence why the fine was so much more. So I'd say to anybody that if they've got issues, I was a bit apprehensive of going for the second prosecution, but certainly, obviously, the resulting fine was more substantial than the first. However, obviously, having said all that and having achieved that, we've got the problem is that the fact we've got 2 successful prosecutions, but we've still got a building in situ and in a very poor state of repair. So, so basically, it was what do we do next? And we were already sort of toying with the idea of whether there was any feasibility of direct action at all. Obviously, the big underlying issue that we had is the fact that we didn't know where the funding would be able to come from, and we had an issue, and the fact is that there was bats at the hotel, and perhaps maybe another problem that we hadn't really thought about until sort of we were seriously thinking about the direct action route was the fact that we also had an electricity substation at the hotel at the far end of it, in sort of like an annex part of the hotel, which also happened to be a maternity roost for lesser horse and shoe bats. So yeah, it was a case that we had a lot of issues sort of against us, and it was a case of that, have we, is it possible to actually sort of achieve anything with this, and how much was it actually going to cost? So one of the first things that we did was we thought, well, we need to sort of see to what extent what issue do we have with bats? Is it a case that there's a lot fewer bats from back in 2009? What was the state of the bats? So obviously we had to go ahead and do a bat survey, which we commissioned ourselves, which basically proved our worst fear, that the bats loved the place and that they seemed to be thriving in it. It wasn't a case that I was hoping that maybe because there was too many windows, it was starting to disintegrate, that maybe this wasn't the perfect condition for bats, but sadly it was. So we also had to think about the, I'll just so sorry, just to point out to you, because it will be useful for later on, is that you have the building here. This is where the substation is. Hopefully you'll be able to see my cursor on this. That this is where the substation is at this end here, and I think this upper level here was sort of the kitchens to sort of the main hotel, was sort of like a thoroughfare there through to the main building area. So in terms of respect to the bats, the bat survey basically brought to our attention that there's actually 3 species of bats at the hotel, and they all have all their certain criteria in their habits, and they like different kind of conditions. They also, we were recommended in terms of with the bat survey, that report, sort of past the mitigation, we were sort of advised that the substation roost should be retained in situ, and it might be possible to actually demolish the main hotel itself without causing damage to that particular section of the hotel. It also stipulated that we should, it's possible, actually build the bat mitigation building that you've seen the foundations for. It's also suggested large and small bat boxes and no external lighting at bat access points. So we had to sort of look into sort of further in terms of if there's any scope to do anything further with this. Obviously we made inquiries in respect to how much demolition of the hotel would potentially cost, and we were banded figures from 100,000 all the way through to over £1 million. which was sort of quite disconcerting, so we weren't really sure what sort of parameters we were actually looking at. One of the concerns that I had was that that if we're looking at taking direct action, and was there any possibility that we could do it partially because of the fact that we had the maternity roost and also the substation at that far end, that annex part of the building. So we actually sought council opinion in respect to that, and they said that it was possible to take partial demolition, bearing in mind the circumstances and the issues that we had in terms of that annex area, whereby we couldn't actually demolish it due to those exceptional circumstances. So we also then at that time we sought the services of Mott MacDonald to assist in terms of starting to look at the possibility of going to tender for actual demolition of the hotel itself. We made initial inquiries in respect to asbestos surveys and potentially how much they would be. And we also made inquiries with Welsh Government in respect to availability of funding. And as I said at the beginning, Harlech Regeneration, there was a project with Harlech Regeneration, and it was seen that the removal and demolition of St David's would assist and maybe kickstart in turning Harlech around and its fortunes about. We were very fortunate that there was a Welsh Government officer who was very much involved and understood sort of the issues that Harlech had, and obviously we were fortunate enough to be able to get some funding from Welsh Government in terms of looking at demolishing St David's. So again, we've got MacDonald to have a look at some of the issues that we had in terms of how we could go about demolition. The site itself, there was some constraints with it. For example, the swimming pool at the front end here needed to be filled. It had been filled. Our problem is that how good had it been filled? What was the state of ground in respect to that? Was it possible to get any machines around at all? And it was concluded that this is the front part, and looking down that way that's where the swimming pool is in front there. So obviously it's changed a lot. But it was deemed that it's probably not possible to get any kind of machinery around the front area of the hotel. And the fact also that there is quite a substantial drop down on that side, and last thing we needed was a digger falling off it. So yeah, so it's quite a restrictive site. So sorry, I've gone the wrong way. So yeah, so we'd started undertaking clearance so we could see what we could contend with in terms of the annex building, and turning this annex end part of the building, shoring it up and making it safe in terms of the substation, but also making it as a place whereby the bats could be as more like a bat roost rather than the actual bat building that had been originally given permission for. So the plan was that this part would turn into being our bat mitigation part of the project, with a view then of being able to demolish the actual hotel itself. So I'll just go through, because there's so much, to be honest. It's been such a long project. Now I've had opportunity with just sorting this presentation to look back through everything. You don't quite appreciate exactly how much went into this. So I apologise if it feels a bit sort of a bit all over the place in some areas. It's just that obviously there was a lot taking place at this time. So as I say, we were looking at getting this end building sorted. Sorry, got the wrong way again. And so we were getting clearance in respect to that. And then there's the builders then going in there in respect to starting to look at changing and turning this into a bat roost. I had to put this in because at the time I thought it was really cool in the fact that I was wearing a face mask, and yeah, and I just think now, gosh, you know, who would have thought we now have to go, when we go shopping, that we have to wear one of these things. But at the time when I took that, it was quite a novelty for me, so I just had to put that in there. But in terms of the actual building that we're looking at doing, having the bat mitigation instead, that obviously the roof was in a very poor condition as per inside the building itself as well. This used to be the kitchen area. And then obviously we've got the window openings, which we had to then, in terms of getting those blocked up and obviously providing the back access points. And then there's another build part there just to show in terms of what work's being done. And then we also had an issue in terms of Japanese knotweed at the same time, which was a sort of a last minute problem that it hadn't really dawned on us that we needed to actually do something with this due to potential works going to be taking place on the site. So in terms of the Japanese knotweed, we had to have it cordoned off, and we also we got it stem injected. Sorry, gone around again. But then another bolt out the blue was that the building, the annex and building, in order to actually make it secure for bats, the actual works to the roof was going to cost an awful lot of money, an extreme amount of money. To the extent was it worth actually paying that to shore up that building and to make it bat friendly, as it were. So we had a bit of a change with the bat mitigation. And wrongly or rightly, and I'm sure there'll be probably some comments on this, we looked at going back to the actual original bat barn area, and and we managed to get permission from the owners to actually go and complete the bat barn itself. So we've got Matt McDonald, who then commissioned all the relevant sort of documents and so forth. And we got an invitation. The tenders was advertised on the authority's website, with a view of starting the building of the bat barn at the beginning of 2019. So just to remind you, that's what the footings were in terms of the base of the bat barn. And that's just to show you the location in respect to it, in terms of the where the hotel is. And yeah, so basically we got one tender in that came within sort of the budget we had, and so the construction of the bat barn commenced. I haven't taken too many photographs because obviously the bat barn itself, it's just that one. But this bat barn was a very special one. In fact, it's got a cater for 3 types of bats. So there's different things that had to be achieved with it, and that's just showing you the poor condition of the hotel that the hotel was getting into. And this is the progress of the bat barn itself. So it's strange that being a compliance officer, normally you're out for demolition or sort of removal of something or ceasing kind of breaches of planning control, and I had this strange, bizarre situation whereby I was facilitating the building of a bat barn. But it came on well, and that was the bat barn completed. It actually sits in really well low down on the site, down from the road. My only worry is that I do wonder whether the bats will actually ever use it. But this is to show you the sort of facilities that were provided inside. You'll see the access points and the hot box there. And that's the thing. Just ignore the shed part. That was the contractors were leaving, and it was their sort of the place where they had their cups of tea and stuff. So it is actually on a wagon. It's going away. So anyway, so then we got to finally the demolition tenders for the actual hotel itself. We finally got those published, and they went on to sell to Wales in April 2019. And sorry, I forgot to mention that because of the bats, we've had to we only were able to do works to demolish the actual hotel itself in a certain period of time, which would be between September and March. So we had to facilitate and ensure that when we actually did go out and the work did take place, that it would have to be in that period. So we went So we ended up going out to tender with South Wales. That we had, I think I met 8 different contractors who had a look at the proposal. And we ended up with 7 tenders in total. And finally, the contract was awarded. And thankfully, funding that we'd had with Welsh Government, that contract did fall in line with the funding that we had. So there was a light at the end of the tunnel in terms of that this actually might happen. However, another setback. Obviously, funding was extremely tight. It was only going to just come within sort of the budget that we had. However, this would have been sort of thwarted if the actual asbestos situation was worse than what we expected. It'd been anticipated that there wouldn't be much asbestos, but we didn't know it was a question mark. So the actual demolition process was put into two parts. There was phase 1, phase 2. Phase 1 was the asbestos surveys and removal, and then the second part would be the main demolition itself. Thankfully, there wasn't much. There wasn't much asbestos, so we were able to proceed to the second phase of the actual contract itself. But we did have that get out clause whereby if there had been too much asbestos, the contractors could have left, and we didn't have to pay the full entirety of the project. So basically a pre-demolition meeting was arranged, which included the ecologist, because the ecologists had to be there in terms of, obviously, if any bats were found at the very early stages of demolition, that they would obviously be able to move them. Oh, and then there was the one final thing, just thinking about it now. We got the site cleared again, because we had to think about the reptiles and obviously removing the reptiles before actual demolition started. So you'll note that that photograph there is actually the Japanese knotweed that had been stem injected and was dying away quite nicely, obviously still fenced off. And this is the reptile mitigation we put in place. We put the fencing up, and then the mats were put out as well, and the ecologists went through for, I think it was about sort of 28 days or so, going around and picking the mats up and getting the reptiles away. And thankfully, I was not asked to remove any slow worms, because it really wouldn't have gone down well with myself. But yeah, it was quite a task, and it had to be done twice a day. And it actually had to be, I didn't appreciate the extent it had to actually be a certain temperature for them before they could lift these mats up for reptiles and removing them from site. So basically, I just thought I would show one last picture of the hotel itself. But before it actually went to demolition, I actually got an opportunity to go inside and have a look at it. It was quite a mess. The views from the hotel itself, I was actually stood at the front of it here, sort of on the upper levels. The views were absolutely amazing, and it just seemed a shame. It's such a lovely sort of building, looking out with the views that it had, that it was going to rack and ruin. In terms of the sort of belongings and so forth, if we'd said to the contractors if there was anything, there was an opportunity that they could be kept to one side, but obviously there was nothing there that was worth keeping, to be honest. And then this is just more photographs of just how bad the whole building was becoming. And yeah, it just seems so surreal that finally, I'm not sure whether I don't know whether the video will work. So yeah, so demolition commenced on the 18th of September 2019, a day that I actually never thought I would actually see. I've got to say, I thought I was actually going to celebrate with a bottle of champagne or something, but I've got to say, very mixed emotions. This building had been a bane of my life for quite some time, quite a number of years, and it was actually to some extent a little bit upsetting that we weren't able to actually save the building to some extent. So very, very mixed emotions. But I think it was certainly the right thing to do. I just wanted to show that video really to show in terms of how they had to sort of take bits by bits down sort of on the upper parts of the actual hotel itself. Because obviously the proximity of the road and everything, that we didn't want any issues with debris flying around anywhere. So it was really sort of quite, it had to be sort of really quite well thought out, and all the demolitions sort of took place from this side of the actual hotel itself. So it's just sort of, I mean, the weather was absolutely glorious. Didn't ask for better weather really for demolition. But this is just to provide you with this section here is obviously the part where it's connected with the annex past the building here, and just there. So basically the hotel was sort of taken down in sections. This section here is the bit that's next to the annex building. What it's decided was that they would take this section out first, and then they'd then go on to the other sections, and then this would be the last section to be taken down. So you see there that the different sections, you can almost see that the sections sort of separated themselves really, and that's where the substation is there. I'm not quite sure how many pictures I can go on with terms of showing the demolition, but so the actual demolition of the hotel itself sort of happened reasonably quickly. The actual sort of the longer time period was to sifting through everything, segregating all the materials, and finalising and sorting those out. And this is basically a photograph of showing you that most of the hotel building is now gone. You can just see still the annex part there. And this is just showing you, this is the annex part that we had to maintain. Obviously they sort of went through all the different parts of the materials, segregate. There was a lot of things that they were able to separate and then take away. I had to take it was sort of trying to do a nice view of the digger with the stunning view in the background there, with the sea and everything. Now this is where the flat roofed area of the hotel was, and actually the basement part of it. They're just sort of showing the extent. And then obviously this is the front part and going down. So yeah, in terms of actually sifting through all the different parts and everything for them to be taken away, that was the longer process itself. And for a while it didn't seem that sort of anything was really happening. Obviously then finally things were crushed down. Obviously the building had to be kept safe. This also had to be secured in terms of bats, in terms of making sure there's some bat mitigation there, but also in terms of if any children did come in, this had to be blocked off, as well as also the ground was very steep in this section. So this part was quite here that we had to make sure that it was going to be safe, it was going to be left in a safe condition, and if any children did go in and play, that they wouldn't hurt themselves, or not try and hurt themselves anyway. And then all this material was then put down and flattened and cleared off and levelled off. And you'll see there, that's the back barn in the background. I'd probably say it's more like a bat hotel. You'll see that the fencing is still there. But that is basically it. That it's sort of all that organising, for actually then the demolitions to take place, and it actually only lasted sort of 2 to 3 months or so. when we'd had the problems for so many years. And this is just showing you sort of how we couldn't leave it in a sort of state like this. I think I actually fell sort of part way down at one point because the ground was fairly loose as well. And so this was just showing sort of the extent of how steep it was and sort of the stairs that we had to make sure this was properly sort of sealed up and finalised in case anyone did come in. So in effect, yeah, it all flattened, all done. And something that obviously I don't think I'd ever want to be involved with something like this again, but I've got to say that it was a fantastic opportunity to be involved in it and be part and parcel of the process. It's certainly made me sort of realise how much work and how much sort of thinking has to go into this kind of action. And it's not a case that you can sort of just think, oh, it's just, I can just waltz in there with a bulldozer and just knock it down. It took 2-3 years preparation, basically. But we've ended up with a final result of having no hotel, and hopefully it will be the kickstart for Harlech to generate and blossom in the years to come. And that's it from me. So welcome back.
Thank you, Jane. That was absolutely fascinating. I hope our delegates joining us felt the same as well. Really, really interesting, and it really was the site that kept giving, I think, with all the various issues that kept coming up. We've got a few questions that have come in. We have a little bit of time to go through some of these. The first one, perhaps, Jane, a kind of obvious question in some ways, from Sophie Jones, of why did you go for demolition rather than repairs? Was there a discussion, debate about that?
Yeah, there was really. I think the first thing is the extent of the repairs that were going to be involved. But I think for myself, it was the fact is that the permission back in 2009 was the case that it was going to be demolished. The hotel itself was going to be demolished, and it was part and parcel of that development. So yeah, it was one of those that we sort of did deliberate. I mean, the actual sort of undertaking the repairs would have been extreme, but the actual annex building that I showed in terms of whether the substation is actually sort of deteriorating more rapidly than we realised. That there's structurally it was failing in places. As also we found out when Mott MacDonald also sort of they did a survey of that building, it was extending actually into the main hotel itself. So there was quite a lot of flaws there. So to some, you know, I think demolition in this case was the only way forward.
Okay, thank you. Michael Woods posed a question which relates to the enforcement comments made in the white paper, which of course is for England, so I'm not expecting you to be on top of this. And really the white paper makes a lot of positive sounds about enforcement and doing more on enforcement action. And the question that Michael poses is whether direct action, because of those comments, could become more politically or less politically acceptable. So from a Snowdonia perspective, how did your members, the politicians and the appointed members, react to this? What was were they supportive of it?
They're absolutely, yes, incredibly supportive of it. I think it's because probably the fact is that there was basically almost like public outrage in respect to what was happening in Harlech itself. That the general public were very, it was almost sort of like bringing the whole town down, and the fact that we were getting so many complaints from them that that it was almost that, you know, they were willing for the hotel to be demolished as well. So I think, yeah, but support from members very much so, but also support from the community itself. I mean, the actual support from the community was unbelievable. We actually had no issues at all. There's no point where they said, oh no, you should be saving this building. There was a couple of comments that saying, oh, it's a shame, it's a pity, but on the whole they actually understood, and I think everyone was really pleased to actually see the hotel demolished. So I don't know if that answers that.
Yeah, that's quite a straightforward one. I suppose not all elected officials might take that road on different projects. It depends on the project itself, but in terms of this one, so.
And as I was saying before, I think the fact is that there was this regeneration programme that Welsh Government were already involved with Council Cadw, and I do believe that this was sort of like a sort of start and a hope that this would bring better things along. I mean, there is still a few issues in Harlech, but hopefully that those can be addressed in the future.
I suppose linked to that and the fact that there was the regeneration ambitions by Welsh Government within Harlech helped get the funding. But if you hadn't got the funding from Welsh Government, would the direct action still have gone ahead, do you think?
Truthfully, I don't believe it would have done, no. And this is the thing with all direct actions, you've got to have the funding available, and we were extremely lucky that Welsh Government supported, and we were provided with funding for it. Obviously, all direct action needs funding, and I think that's a big problem that local planning authorities have, that there isn't that funding available. Because if it was available, then I think that many local planning authorities would look at taking direct action more often.
Okay, thanks. And we've got a question here about the bat barn, and whether there were any difficulties encountered in actually erecting it.
No, it's I think probably one of the things that sort of really sort of came about is the fact is that we used Mott MacDonald, like project managed the actual build for us, and I think that's one of the things that really had sort of, if anyone's looking at taking direct action at such a scale like this, is making sure you've got good project management there in terms of taking this type of work forward. I mean, Mott MacDonald were excellent in terms of having the meetings every month, and with the contractors, going through any issues. So no, it's the actual building of it itself went absolutely according to plan. And so yeah, we had no problems. In fact, it was a good build, as it were. So yeah, there was no issues with it at all.
Right, and you mentioned during your presentation you weren't sure whether the bats would actually move in. Do you know if they have?
Well, with COVID-19, I'm not sure whether the ecologist has actually been able to go and have a look or not. Maybe I should have contacted her to see whether she'd been to have a look. So obviously, to actually go into the bat barn, you've got to be sort of have the relevant qualifications. I know that the last time that they'd been there hadn't been any sign of any bats being using the barn, which obviously was a bit of a concern. But there's time yet, and I truly hope that they will move in, because it's a lovely place for them to live.
Great, 5-star hotel for the bats.
No, actually, quite literally, it's quite something. The fact it caters for 3 species of bat, it's quite a build. So
brilliant. There's a few questions in about the costs and whether they've been charged to the developer, or has there been a charge put on the land? And I suppose linked to that, who owns the land now?
The land's from us. Well, this is the bit whereby I didn't really want to sort of go into costings as much, because obviously, as I said at the beginning, this case actually hasn't been finalised yet, and this is the fact is that obviously sort of we're looking at land charges and so forth. So it's something that we're still involved with at the moment, but yeah, it's ongoing, as it were. So yeah, that's you know, we're hoping that potentially that there is that possibility that we'll be able to recoup those in the future. But as far as in terms of who actually owns it at the minute, my understanding is that it's still the actual same developer.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Understand sometimes these things are live and it's difficult to go into details.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, understand that. And you mentioned earlier that the community was supportive of this action. Presumably they're happy now that the building's not there, although perhaps would like to take its place.
I've certainly not heard anything bad from anybody at all. I mean, there's a couple of things that that maybe should raise in terms of that. While we were actually when the actual main building was being demolished, I actually had a telephone call from somebody that lived down the road, and they'd actually requesting whether they could actually have the St David's sign that was at the top of the hotel. And I obviously can imagine, I thought, well, why on earth would they want that? And so I inquired, well, why are you wanting it? And they wanted to put it in their garden, basically, as sort of like a memorial to the hotel, which was quite mind-boggling, to be honest. Obviously, we had to say no, you can't have the sign, I'm afraid. And also, we actually had a situation whereby somebody did ask whether they could have a load of bricks or some kind of stone that they could then sell to members of the public as sort of like as a souvenir of the hotel, and having a souvenir of it. And that was to get funding for the Christmas lights for Harlech, and which was a wonderful idea. And obviously we said, well, no, we can't do that. But I do know that the actual contractor that carried out the demolition actually provided them with some money towards then putting towards the Christmas lights in Harlech. So
a happy story anyway.
Happy, yeah, but that community side of things, obviously very upset at the time when there was a loss in the landscape, but everything, you know, that it seems that everyone's happy, hopefully.
Yeah, great. And just there's one final question, and I suppose it's a real killer question from all of this that's gone through the effort that's been put into by the park and by yourself. And Emma Green asks, would you or the Park Authority do more direct action in the future?
You know what, if we had the funding, to me it's absolutely. What I find with prosecution proceedings is it's very great. It's great getting the fines, but you've still got a problem looking at you. Obviously I've been really fortunate enough that we were able to actually get rid of the problem that we had here with St David's, as much as that, you know, it was a lovely building, but it was the right thing to do. But certainly if the funding's there, and I think it really comes down to that, then certainly I'd look at doing direct action again. I've actually done it previously at South Lakeland District Council, and I've also briefly done it with something far smaller, just like more of a garden clearance at the Snowdonia National Park. But yeah, certainly it's an option I certainly would keep open for sure, especially if you've got the funding. But it's the funding that's the problem, so.
Yeah. Okay, well, thank you very much, Jane. That was incredibly interesting, and as I said before, it really was the site that kept giving. But hopefully, there's a future dawn for the site in Harlech. I know it's quite a prominent site up on the hill there. So I know it's a fantastic area. And when we're all freed from lockdown, I'd recommend people to go to Harlech. It's fantastic, and to the park generally. So thank you very much. Thank you all for joining us today, and thank you to Jenny Devine from the RTPI for organising this week of events. So thank you.
Yeah.